Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
And we're back for another edition of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. I know it's been several weeks, so if you're listening right now, this is obviously a new episode, not a repeat episode. So we've had some listeners reach out and be like, hey, man, we've been listening to some old episodes because you guys haven't come out with any. Well, here it is. We are back. Mike is not with me today. I do have a special guest that I'll introduce in a second, but I wanted to come out with an episode and try to get some more consistent weekly content for you guys. Some schedule changes happen outside of boxing for us, so it's been a little bit difficult for us to get used our weekly episodes of the Last Round Boxing Podcast, but we are back. And as I mentioned, my guest of the week who's subbing in for my co-host Mike this week, he's obviously no stranger to the Last Round Podcast here. He's been on multiple times before. And obviously, as you hardcore boxing fans and listeners who listen to this, you most likely know who this guy is. He's a member of the Ring Ratings Panel. He's a member of the Boxing Writers Association of America, and he's the current editor-in-chief of FightsATW.com. Abraham Gonzalez returns to the show. Thanks for joining us, Abe.
Yo, what's good? The tallest Mexican I know. What's up, man?
You know what's funny is that people see me in person, man, and then they see us, they talk about the show, and they're like, man, you guys are huge, because Mike's like Mike's like 6'4", so we're both pretty tall, man. So when you see us in person, it's definitely a culture shock, man.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. So let's just jump straight back into a fight review this past Saturday, I believe, the November 2nd, 2024, on DAZN from Las Vegas, a Golden Boy Promotions card for the WBA International Lightweight title. Floyd Schofield improves to 18-0 with 12 KOs, with the 12-round unanimous decision win over Rene Teles Giron, who takes the third loss of his career. Schofield won by scores of 116-111, 118-109, and 118-109 again. The fight was a little dirty. There was a couple fouls involved. Schofield did hit the canvas during the bout, even though you just read the scores and you think, oh, he cruised to a decision. No, he suffered some moments there. Even one point in the corner when after a round was over, he missed the stool and he almost fell through the ropes. So that was also a moment. Maybe he was a little bit discombobulated. But obviously, Abe, what did you think about Schofield's win? How did he look? Some people compared him online to a Sean Porter-esque fighter. I saw a couple of those comparisons. What did you think about his win? And, what's next for him?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about it, he was originally supposed to fight Ashton Silva on the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight card on November 15th. Obviously, Silva got knocked out a month or two ago, and then they had a pivot from that fight. So whether people want to believe it or not, this Giron matchup was like a step up from that, because Silva, I was never really convinced that he was like this hot prospect. He had a handful of fights, and it is what it is. But Giron had been there with some guys. He's been in there with some competitors. He knocked out Carlos Balderas when everybody was high on him, right? And
That's
he was
right.
coming,
Yeah,
and he was coming out. He knocked them out. So he's been in with some guys, and so and I tweeted that early. I said, "Listen, this guy is tough. Ask Carlos Balderas." And I was not surprised that Schofield hit the deck. I think that from Golden Boy's point of view, they were probably getting a lot of pressure from Schofield and his dad, like, oh, we want the big fights. So this was Golden Boy's way of saying, okay, you want the big fights? Beat this tough guy convincingly, and then we'll have that conversation. Mm-hmm. But guess what? He didn't beat him convincingly. Even though it was a unanimous decision, he struggled in there. It seemed like that he was having a hard time finding a like a plan B and making the adjustments. And when he couldn't make the adjustments, he just went to what he knew, which was kind of like the Sean Porter-esque style that you mentioned. And that almost got him in trouble, even late. So, I mean, it was cool. He got the W. I still think that he needs some work, and he's not ready for those big names.
And the one promoter that we know, obviously, you know, our promoters at one point or another, they're going to put you in with some pretty tough opponents. But Golden Boy is definitely like that. You know, maybe it's because like De La Hoya kind of fighter turned promoter, and he kind of that's how he kind of conducted his career for a long time. So we've seen it, especially us being here in Southern California. We've seen it up close and personal at these Golden Boy fights where they'll put you in there, man. Like, because you know they'll put you in there a lot faster than these other promoters. Are like, hey, you know, it's time to step up. We get, you know, you want these world title fights. You got to fight these tougher, edgier guys. So Schofield, you know, got the win. Obviously, still a young guy, but like you said, Golden Boy, him and his dad probably, you know, they wanted some tough fights. Golden Boy was like, okay, beat this guy. He might not be a big name, but he's a tough guy. He got the attention after the win from guys like Tank Davis, who's obviously a big star in boxing, and Shakur Stevenson. What kind of reaction would you give to that? I mean, obviously it's good if somebody like Tank Davis is tweeting about you, but what do you think?
Yeah, and I think honestly, it was more about like Schofield was really talking a lot prior to, and not so much him, his dad was. And so you know, if Schofield would have been, you know, whitewashing this guy, you probably would have not heard from them. But because he had some trouble in there, and all the stuff that his dad was talking in the week wasn't like, the math wasn't mathing at moments, then that gave them the opportunity to have something to say about him, if that makes sense. That's one. And two, both of those guys you mentioned, they've got fights coming up. Haven't fought in the ring in a while. If everybody's talking about certain fights or whatever, they're going to chime in because they're going to get a little bit of that attention taken away from that fighter to them. And, you know, they're reminding everybody that, hey, they're going to be coming up with a fight soon. So it's kind of like a mixed bag in between those two things.
And I think Oscar De La Hoya, obviously the CEO, owner of Golden Boy Promotions, they asked him after the fight, you know, what he thought of the performance of Schofield, and I think he even gave it a letter grade. I don't know.
C minus.
He said C minus, right? So you know, that's also something to look into. You know, is Golden Boy gonna talk to Schofield and his dad and say, hey, look, like you got the win, and you know, it's a good thing you got this experience, but you know, maybe we should slow down a little bit. You know, let's not jump into these big names yet, like a Tank Davis and stuff like that. But, you know, how much, because obviously, you know, the bigger the name that you have from what we know in the sport, being around it for so long, you know, if you have like a Canelo name or a Tank Davis or something, like you have the power because you've proven it already, whether it's financially or ratings or just whatever. You have the power to kind of say, hey, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. You know, obviously the younger cats who are fighting and, you know, starting building their career, if they're going to say that, these promoters are going to be like, what? No, like, what have you proven? Like, either take the fight or don't fight. Do you think Schofield kind of has maybe a little bit of leverage if he tells De La Hoya and Golden Boy, like, hey, no, we want to go higher. We want to go higher. Nah,
not at all. I think that, again, if he would have dominated from rounds 1 through 12 or whatever it was, then we'd have had a different conversation. But no, not after that fight. He needs to show me a little more against somebody of that caliber or just a bit higher before he can have any type of leverage.
So who would you think, well, you know, with the boxing mind that you have, who would you want to put him against in the next, 6 months?
It's tough because at 135, it's tough because I feel like at 135, it's like the young guys, and then it's like the champs and the stars. Like there's really not a lot of in between. So do you run the risk of putting him against another young guy like a Keyshawn Davis, and then having that? I don't know. I mean, would Top Rank want to do that? Probably not, because they're pretty systematic on how they want to build a fighter, right? So, man, it's tough. I'd have to really look at the rankings here, and maybe I could pull it up real quick to see who's out there, because the other part that's rough for Schofield is that I think he's ranked pretty high, and so you might not have the time to stall him a little bit. All right, so let me see. You have like a Edwin De Los Santos, but that's a bad fight for him.
Yeah, I don't like that fight.
Joe Cordina, maybe. That's the Shakur's fighting. Maybe somebody like that. Maybe a Tevin Farmer. Tevin Farmer has been lately been passed around.
And he's got somewhat of a name.
Yeah. Let me see. Frank Martin. That could be a fight. Frank Martin. He's not scheduled to fight nobody. He hasn't fought nobody. What about Gabriel Flores Jr., G Squad?
That's right.
Could do something like that. You do something like that in Stockton, maybe you could pack a crowd. Let me see who else. Because Morataya is too high.
Yeah.
Do you put him against Andy Cruz?
No, I don't like that fight either.
I don't like it either. So
not
that's
for Schofield, I mean.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's a tough battle on what you do. I think that you give him a couple of, Indio type of fights, in the next like 6-7 months. You give him at least 2, see what he looks like after that. And then think about maybe matching him up with one of the bigger names at that point, like middle to the end of 25. Because, we're going to get into this later, but you've got all these promotional companies, making their alliances. And so with Top Rank's deal ending in August, we don't know what that's going to mean for them. So I think it's going to be a wait and see. But for Schofield, probably a bigger name at the second half of 25 instead of the first.
I do like Schofield, though. He was on the show in the past here on the last round. And, I look at it, from silver lining, regardless of how, he did get the unanimous decision this past weekend. And even though there was some fouls, he did hit the canvas and all that. Silver lining out of it is that, if people are comparing you to somebody like Sean Porter, that's not bad at all, man. I mean, Porter, obviously he took some losses, but he was a world champ and he fought literally all the dogs. Like he went in there. He was one of the first. He was one of the first guys, or the first guy from that PBC crop to fight Crawford. Crawford was boxed out for a long time, and Porter went over there and was like, "Hey, I'll take that risk first to show everybody." He fought him before Spence and all that. So silver lining, if you're getting compared to somebody like Porter, I don't think that's bad at all, right?
No, it's not. And listen. I talked to Schofield maybe about a year or two ago. He's a really good kid. I think what the problem is going to start becoming, and it feels like it is already, and it's going to get even worse, is that it's almost like his dad wants to be in that spot more than a little bit. Taking over interviews. And
are you really surprised though? How many times have we seen that in the sport?
Yeah, I know, but it's like after you see it a couple of times, you start to kind of not wanting. See, the thing is, when we've seen it in the past, it's come every kind of once in a while, right? But in the last like 3 years, there's way too many of those combinations. And so now it's getting to the point where we're just kind of, I think people are getting over that. And they're just like, oh man, here we go. You got Teo and his pops. You got Ennis and his pops. You got who else? You got a few others in there, but you got Fury and his pops.
Yeah.
So and in the common denominator of all of that is the dad tries to be a character or part of the story, and it's like, come on, man, like we want to hear from your son,
right?
But then he was like, I heard him in some interview. He said that the brain doesn't develop till 23, and he don't know how to answer questions. I was like, I don't care about all that, man. You're not the one that's fighting. I want to hear from the guy that's fighting.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, like we've seen before, especially when they're younger. They're younger, and obviously, like there's a good chance that dad kind of brought them up and was with them since they were kids. So, there's loyalty there. I mean, That's not surprising at all. So, they would have, I mean, you would think how he would have to get, as he gets older and if he keeps winning and keeps getting these fights, he starts making more money, his profile grows. Then he gets that confidence like, hey, thanks, Dad, for taking me along this ride. But like, I made it. I'm the guy now. Like, I don't need, I'm sure he'll still have them there. But like, you get to a point if success keeps coming. But I don't think, like you said, like you were touching on, like, yeah, you want to hear from the guy, but I think it's going to be a little bit before Schofield gets comfortable to be at that point in his career.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, dad, having a family member, it's been boxing. We always see dad and son combo growing up, and they get to this point, and they're just like, there's loyalty there. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully that doesn't cause him to not stay busy because, the dad is pressing too much.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm sure, De La Hoya and his team over there will figure something out. De La Hoya is the type of guy, like, he'll tell you to your face and you're like, hey man, like, come on. And if we see a clapback Thursday from De La Hoya in regards to Schofield, then we know something's wrong, man. We know something's wrong. Think about that.
Oh yeah, clapback Thursday, my favorite segment of the week.
That's what I look forward to every week, man. If that doesn't come out, something's happening. Man. Also on the card, Gabriela Fondura remains undefeated at 15-0 with 7 KOs as she gets the KO in the 7th round over another Gabriela Alanis, or Alanis, Alanis, I think it's Alanis, 15-1, takes the first loss of her career. Fondura becomes the youngest undisputed flyweight champ, male and female, in the sport. Fondura had one knockdown, and it looks like I hope I'm saying it right. Alanis was disagreed with the referee's call on that knockdown, but then Fondura just put her down again face first and just ended the fight and got the victory. What did you think about Fondura's performance?
Yeah, so she has the that work rate, like kind of like her brother, throws a lot of punches, a lot of combinations. Listen, she's the undisputed champ. It's hard because, as somebody reminded me, the inventory in women's boxing is not a lot, right? And so, she made undisputed. I'm going to have a hard time seeing, who's going to be the name that's going to raise her profile, because there isn't anybody in those weight classes that can do that. Yeah. Senicia was the closest, right? And she retired. And what's her name from Golden Boy? Maybe what's her name? The Olympian.
Esparza,
Marlon Esparza. So that could be a fight, maybe. Kind of raise her profile a little bit. But outside of that, she's gonna have a hard time trying to raise her profile, especially in that division, in those lighter weights, because there's not a whole lot of big names on there.
Right.
If she was like at 130, between 130 and 140, now you have some names right in the UK. You got some, Bumgarner. You have Katie Taylor, Serrano. You got all these other names. But at the weight class that she's at, it's going to be hard for her to do anything.
Right.
I mean, I'm not shitting on her accomplishment. She did her thing. But then it's like, what happens now?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's unfortunate, because obviously we know you probably talked about this too, but Mike and I, we've talked about this on past episodes. It's just the depth of the female boxing. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's not their fault. The fighters that are pros and trying to like make fights happen. It's just what they're dealing with. The depth. You have to be able to market the sport a little bit better, I guess, to females to say like, hey, But I mean, it's hard. Nobody wants to get punched in the face. Like it's a hard sport. It's not a lot of people that they jump at the chance to get in. So, I mean, maybe, she's a big, she's got height, I mean, obviously her and Sebastian Fundora, her brother, like they're big, they got good genes in terms of physicality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if Amanda Serrano can win multiple belts in multiple weight classes and move up and up and up and up, why can't Fundora do it too, and expand her options?
Yeah, she possibly can. I guess we just have to see how it goes. It has to make sense. And I mean, maybe Marlena Esparza might make sense. I don't know if she's retired or if she's still fighting or whatever, but that would be the fight that I would say would make sense next. If Senicia hadn't retired, then, we would have been talking about maybe trying to make that. But I think the Marlon Esparza fight might be good to make next just because of the name recognition.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think, so obviously Seniesa just recently retired. I know she did a little bit of a piece with Top Rank and ESPN, and they released some little interview with her. So obviously congratulations to her and her career. She achieved a lot. These female boxers, it's very hard to achieve some notoriety and some success like that. And I think she did probably as much as she could do with the resources that she had. So, she did very good.
And I was going to say, and then, maybe a Yokasta Valle, right?
That's true. Yeah.
That can be a fight if Yokasta, wants to move up to that weight class. You know what I mean? I think she's competed as high as 108, I think.
Right.
Maybe, but maybe she wants to take a shot at the undisputed crown at 112. She might be willing to do that.
I mean, think about it. They're both obviously they didn't align with Golden Boy, and like we talked about the depth of the female divisions. That's the reality. I'm sure Golden Boys, that's crossed their mind. Maybe they've proposed it to both camps. Say, look, it's undisputed. There's belts here now, or Fundora might be undisputed before this past weekend. Obviously, 6 pounds or 4 pounds, 108 to 112. There's some name recognition there. Fundora has some name recognition. Yokasta Valle has obviously been with Seniesa, and she has some type of name recognition. Obviously, I believe she's from Costa Rica. She's shown there that she could draw a crowd.
You can probably sell like a mega fight there for the undisputed crown.
Yeah, and I mean when she fought there, I remember. I think when Golden Boy had signed her, and we're trying to build her up, and they put on a fight in Costa Rica for her. That was a huge crowd, man. They showed out for her. And that was just, I mean, I know the money isn't the same, but in terms of seeing that on TV, people watching that, people will notice oh, wow, that person's got support.
Yeah. And remember that Gabriela is under Samson, if I'm not mistaken. So, Samson's bag is South America, Central America,
That's true.
That's his territory. So he can definitely make that work, and it could be a huge event.
Yeah. No, yeah. That's a good point. I mean, I don't think that's that out of the realm of possibility in terms of a Yokasta Valle and Fundora fight. I think that might get made sometime next year. I could see that.
Just remember, you heard it here first.
You did. You heard it here first, right? Abraham Gonzalez, obviously. Give him the shout out. When they talk about it later, they better give you the credit, man. The hat tip, the hat tip, man.
Like Jake Paul didn't give me the hat tip after I wrote an article saying that his fight is going to do 20 million views. the next day he puts out a statement that says that he's going to do 25 million views. No coincidence is boxing, man.
Hey, man, what we've talked about before, even if they don't like share your stuff or, promote it, a lot of these people in the sport, they read everything. They read and they listen and they watch everything. They just kind of stay in the shadows, man. So it happens, man. It happens.
Yeah.
Moving on, also this past weekend from the Turning Stone Resort in Verona, New York on ESPN Plus, a top rank on ESPN Plus broadcast. Oshaki Foster gets the split decision in a rematch over Robson Conceição, or Conceição, I believe, who takes the third loss of his career. These guys just going back and forth. Conceição took the WBC junior lightweight title from Foster earlier this year, I believe back in July. Mm-hmm. And now in the rematch, now in November, Foster gets a split decision win in another probably more competitive fight than the last one by scores of 115, 113, 113, 115, and 115, 113 again. What did you think about Foster's win? And was this a more competitive, closer fight than the last one?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing with this fight because it was round 13. It was round 13, and the fight was going like in the same direction as the first one.
That's nuts, man.
And it was just close, and it was like, man, what's gonna happen? And then all of a sudden, towards the end of the championship rounds, I think Oshaki Foster had a moment where he realized, this fight is almost identical to the first one.
Right.
I need to do something different from 10 to 12 to ensure that this fight is mine. And that's what he did. He took over the fight at that point. He didn't do that in the first one. And when I spoke to him, he admitted that he let his foot off the gas on those championship rounds. But now, this time around, he hurt Conceição on the 10th, I think it was. The 11th, he had a really good round, and he finished, pretty decent in the 12th. So that was the difference. And yeah, I mean, I think that if these guys were to fight 10 times, you get the same fight 10 times in a row.
Yeah. There's always that one guy, that like just you have each other's number, huh? And then I think they found each other here. Yep.
And I'm gonna tell you, I know that Conceição was like, telling him to give me the rematch. If I'm Foster, I'm not giving him no rematch.
I mean, I think there will be a trilogy eventually, but I don't think it's going to be as fast as people think.
Nah, I'm keeping it moving.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I agree. I think Foster will proceed forward, but in the future, maybe when they both get a couple more fights under the belt, maybe in 2 years or so, I see it running it back, a trilogy. I mean, it always happens. Everything comes around in boxing, doesn't it?
Yeah. I don't see it. And the reason why I don't see it is because I think with them, Conceição is probably going to stay at 130 and Foster's going to be at 135. Foster had told me that, 135 was something that he was already looking at for next year. The loss kind of delayed that a little bit because if he would have won, he would have moved up to lightweight at the beginning of the year.
Right.
But because he lost and he had the rematch, but now he's in a position where he's like, well, if I can unify, then, let's do that. So that's why he's kind of looking at the Valdez Navarrete fight.
Yeah.
So he might get the winner of that, and then see how that goes. And if he can go on an undisputed run at 130, he will. But if not, he'll grab a fight at 135 if it's available. Right.
Yeah. And Foster did say after this fight that, it wasn't his best performance. So he was, at least critical of himself. Sometimes fighters aren't just, they say like, oh, I did fine. I got the win. But, he seemed like he was pretty honest with himself and the media saying, you know what, I could have done better. And, but it's like It's like we talked about before. Like, they're just those guys that have each other's number, man. Like, it's just like you probably did the best that you could against a guy who just has your number, and vice versa, right?
Yeah. And you know, if you look at the scorecards, they were kind of all over the place, and a lot of swing rounds, bro. A lot of swing rounds, and even if you look, they didn't give. One of the judges gave Conceição the last 2 rounds, which I disagree with. Right. The second one gave Conceição the 11th, but then Oshaki Foster the 10th and the 12th, and then the last one gave Foster the 10th, but then gave Conceição the 11th and 12th. So they just kind of were all over the place with those scorecards, and it was, in all honesty, it was a really tough fight to score because of the rounds being so close. Some of those early rounds, there just wasn't enough going on. Like, right. Foster wasn't doing enough. What Conceição was throwing, was he landing or not? You know, that's where the numbers come in. But he was throwing a lot and bringing the pressure, so people probably like that. You know, the judges. So if I'm Foster, I keep it moving, man. I don't want to give that guy another opportunity to try to take my title.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's going to keep it moving. And I mean, you also got to think about, like, Conceição, probably, if he won, obviously he'd be 2-0, so he'd probably have more of a justification behind it, like, oh yeah, I'm going to keep it moving. But he'd probably think the same thing. He's like, man, I'm going to keep it moving. So, you know, one or the other, you know. So
if he gives him another fight, it'll be like in 2026.
Yeah, that's why I said like 2 years.
Yeah.
It won't be like in the next 12 months, 18 months or something. Like, yeah, I'd say 2 years or after that is maybe the earliest, you know. But yeah, you never know, man. You never know. Also on the card, Raymond Morataya, we touched on him earlier, gets the second round TKO over Jesus Perez in a lightweight battle. Morataya is now ranked in the top 5 for 3 governing bodies. What do you think about Morataya's performance here?
I think he looked good. This is the thing with Morataya. It's either sink or swim right now. He needs a big fight next to figure out what he has, because he's already like at a limit. I need to see him with either Loma or Baranchek or somebody like that. But that needs to happen. You know, I'm already like, let's stop with these in between fights. No, he needs to be tested now. And I think he's ready to be tested, and whether or not he passes or not, that's a different story. But I think that he's already past, you know, trying to prove himself. They either know what they have or they don't have.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Lomachenko. Obviously, there was some rumblings earlier this year, within the last couple months, about him and Tank Davis, and then, you know, obviously that didn't pan out. Loma said that, you know, he's thinking about retiring. Loma and Morataya are both under top rank, so obviously it's going to be a lot easier to make that fight. But I think the X factor there, as like I mentioned, is Lomachenko's intention of continuing as a pro. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, he's one of the most accomplished fighters we've ever seen in the history of the sport. You know, is he going to retire? And I believe he has a belt. So, yeah. If he retires, the belt gets vacated, and does Morataya fight for a vacant shot somewhere?
That's basically what they're saying,
right?
Yep.
I mean, obviously, I prefer as a fan, obviously, to have Morataya versus Loma. You know, I mean, Loma's always still shows that he's showing the Haney fight and all that he still got something, but. You know, what do you think about in regards to Lomachenko? Is it 50-50 that he retires or stays, or does Morataya get a shot against him for that title?
I think it's 50-50, but if you ask me, I don't see him fighting again.
Yeah, me neither.
I think that the only fight for him that makes sense to put on the gloves again would be a Tank Davis fight, and that's because the money has to be there, right? and more than likely it would be, if they can do it. But that'd be the only fight that would make sense.
Yeah. But I could totally see, Loma retiring, vacating the belt, and Murataya fighting, obviously somebody who's highly ranked who also gets a shot for the vacant title, maybe in the next couple, like 6 months or something. I mean, that's what I think is going to happen. Because I think you're right. I think Loma, I think he hangs up the gloves, man. I think he's done. I think he's accomplished what he needs to accomplish. And because when they were talking about Tank Davis and him, I was like, oh, I think that's going to happen. Obviously we wanted to see that fight 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever. But I thought, oh, Loma probably looks at it like, hey, I'm at the end of my career. It's going to be a sweet payday. I'll get in there, whether win or lose. I'll probably retire after and go off into the sunset with a sweet check. But obviously it didn't work out, And
you know what? You never know, man. This could be, gamesmanship, right? Loma trying to get Turkey to jump in and maybe offer even bigger money for that fight.
Right.
And instead of getting paid $3 million or $4 million to fight Tank, maybe he gets paid 10.
Yeah. Everybody, Turkey's the lottery right now, man.
Yeah. That's why a lot of big fights aren't being made, because all these promoters, what they're doing is they're holding out to see if Turkey wants it, because then they'll spend his money for it instead of spending their own.
Yeah, exactly. That's the nature of the game right now, man. Definitely the nature of the game. Moving on to this weekend fight previews, November 8th, 2024, on Friday from Norfolk, Virginia, from the Scope Arena, another top rank on ESPN Plus event. Keyshawn Davis, 11-0 with 7 KOs, goes up against Gustavo Limos, 29-1 with 19 KOs, a lightweight battle. This would be Keyshawn Davis's third fight of the year. He stopped Jose Pedraza earlier this year and got a unanimous decision win over Miguel Madueño earlier this year as well. What do you think about this fight, Abe?
I like it. It's a step up for Keyshawn. Let's remember that Limos went the distance with Richardson Hitchens, right, in his last fight. So this is a really good test for Keyshawn to see where he's at. Because Hitchens is fighting for a world title here soon. So this would be a good test for Keyshawn to see where he's at and see if he's ready for that next step.
And Davis, he was in that pack that was signed by Top Rank from the Olympians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was in that group right there. So, let's see how he pans out. Because we've seen, some Olympians get signed in the past, and, they have the pedigree, but then, the pros, sometimes they just can't adapt and it doesn't pan out. But I think it'll work for Davis. I think he's been doing okay. I think he'll pan out, have a nice career.
Yeah, he's another guy though. I feel like too many distractions outside the ring.
Yeah, that's true.
He might end up overlooking a guy and getting beat, sort of like what happened to Jared Anderson. I think Jared Anderson took Bacoli a little light.
Yeah.
And
that was a dangerous fight. When it was made, I was like, oh, I don't know if that's going to work, man.
Yeah. I mean, but if Jared Anderson would have been on his game, it should have worked.
Right.
But he wasn't. And he fought right into Bacoli's fight. So, yeah. I mean, I think that Keyshawn has potential. It's just that we have to see when it really counts what he looks like. And when I say when it really counts, when the opponent level is there, like when it's a high level opponent. Honestly, I don't want to hear Keyshawn like, oh, I want Teofimo next and all that. Pump the brakes. All right, fight somebody like in the top 5 or top 7, and dominate them, and then we can start kind of having that conversation.
Right. Yeah. It's like we talked about earlier with Schofield. Like, the scores show you a different fight. Like if you just didn't see the fight, you saw the scores. But, he was knocked down. Like there were some moments where he kind of went through adversity. He didn't dominate. Because
I've seen, in some of Keyshawn Davis's fights, I've seen some lazy defense there.
Right.
And times where he's been caught with his hands down. And for me, a more experienced fighter would capitalize off of that. And, it could be a nightmare for him.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm definitely interested to see, especially with Lemus's, over 30 fights. So he's got a lot of experience, more than double the fights that Keyshawn Davis has. So, I do expect this to be quite a bit of a test for Davis. But, like we said earlier, eventually they're going to have to put you up and level you up because you need to in order to get to the top. I mean, that's the nature of the game, right? Moving on, this upcoming Saturday on DAZN, Jaron Boots Ennis returns to the ring as he puts up his IBF welterweight championship at 147 pounds from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania against Karen Chukadazian. Did I say that right? What do you think?
I think so.
I hope so. We'll just call him Karen.
Karen.
I know people don't like the name Karen right now. It's been one of those names, but so Ennis, I mean, I think he might be 30 years old or getting close to 30. Is he one of those guys? What do you think about this fight first? And is Ennis one of those guys just kind of like he also needs to kind of step on the gas here and kind of get one of those big names?
So remember, this is the second version of this fight. Ennis beat this guy like 11 rounds to 1 the last time. So I expect the same, maybe even him stopping him sooner. Ennis, I think he's like 28, 29, something like that. But this is the problem. With Ennis, he should be moving to 154. The problem is that if he moves to 154, he won't have any leverage. Then he goes right back to the problem that he had originally at 147, which was nobody wanted to fight him. So what he's probably thinking is, let me get a belt or two in addition to this one, become a unified champion, then move up in using one of those rules where you can compete for the title right above. So I think the WBO, hence why they were targeting Brian Norman Jr., right? So if he beats Brian Norman Jr., then he'll petition to become a super champion if he does beat Brian Norman Jr. And then he can say, I want to fight Sebastian Fundora next. And they'd have to make that happen, right? So that would be the only way to do it. So he has to fight Karen because he's a mandatory. But then after this fight, it's up to Eddie Hearn to try to land a fight with one of the other champions. He's got to do that. And it's going to be hard because two of the champions are with PBC. And then Brian Norman Jr. is with Top Rank, which that's possible. But given, the public negotiations that kind of went south between them two camps, I think that it's, Eddie's going to have to give in a lot more, even though he may not feel like he does. But in order to please his client, i.e. Ennis, he's going to have to probably give in a little bit and in order to make the fight.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, Eddie Hearn has shown, especially with, I know I don't want to compare Ennis to Canelo, essentially, but not even just Canelo, but even other fighters. But, Canelo is obviously a big example where, Eddie Hearn has shown that he's willing to work with these fighters. And if there's an opportunity to go to having to fight on another platform, if the money's right, he's like, yeah, do it. And, they win and all that. Eddie Hearn has shown that he has some type of reasonable presence there.
And it can happen. I think that the approach needs to be different because that initial approach from Eddie was, here's this, take it or leave it.
Right.
Because he felt like he was in full control of the situation.
Right.
And it was almost kind of disrespectful because Brian Norman Jr. is a champion as well. There should have been some sort of back and forth dialogue, not, hey, take this or leave it, because that's not the way business negotiations work. So if Boots wins this fight, and Brian Norman Jr. wins his fight in March against the guy that he was supposed to fight this week, but he injured his hand. I think that they revisit that fight for the summer.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that makes sense. Moving on to news and notes section of this week's episode of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Naoya the Monster Inoue has agreed to a sponsorship deal with Riyadh Season and Turkey Al Sheikh. Yahoo Japan reported that it was worth $15 million in value. It does not require Inoue to fight physically in Saudi Arabia. There is appearances at events that are involved, commercial activities, social media content, and all that. Were you surprised about this, Abe? I mean, I didn't see this. I mean, obviously, Inoue is a big star, and it's not like Turkey and, whatever their plan is over there for Riyadh Season. It wasn't eventually going to happen, or at least try to attempt. But to me, it kind of came out of left field. I was like, oh, wow. Inoue, like, he always seems like that quiet guy, and, when he takes pictures, it always looks like he's pissed off.
Yeah, so Inoue was playing a little hardball with Turkey. I remember he kind of commented, like, I think he commented or one of his people in his party saying something along the lines that, he wasn't really interested in fighting in Saudi Arabia or in the UK or whatever the case may be, via the Turkey situation. But I think that was, again, kind of playing hard to get. Now, being in the position that he's in, as we talked about leverage, he had all the leverage. So, in so many words, he basically told Turkey, you want to sign me, then you need to come here to close me. So what did Turkey do? He flew to Japan.
Yeah.
And met with Inoue and did all that. Because Inoue had all the leverage and he could afford to, because he doesn't need Turkey. Turkey needs him more than he needs Turkey. And then Inoue returned the favor and went, to Saudi, and then they finished their deal or whatever the case may be. So this is just gonna, make Inoue that much more of a global star. I mean, he's a star in Japan already. He's making a ton of money over there already. So, this just expands his profile. That's all.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Turkey, Saudi Arabia started getting involved a couple of years ago. We started seeing kind of some developments here and there. But I think this year, especially in the last 6 months, he's really stepped on the gas and really trying to, I think this within the last couple of days or so, or 24 hours, 48 hours, Queensberry, Frank Warren has struck a partnership with Riyadh Season and Turkey Al Sheikh over there. So there's another promoter that's involved, right? Yeah,
well, they had the partnership with Riyadh already. They did the deal. They did the deal with the Zone.
You're right. I'm correct.
Yeah. So they did the deal with the Zone after having that long-term deal with Top Rank.
Right.
So the deal expires in April. So starting in April, Queensberry cards will be on the Zone. Now, mind you, Queensberry cards, a lot of them were like on ESPN, and some of them would show up on the Zone every once in a while. But there was a lot of cards that we wouldn't see here that were Queensberry, and we were just SOL. If you were here in the U.S. So now being able to see some of those cards and some of those fights is it's good. It's good. I mean, I just hope that the Zone doesn't raise the price again, and make it even more expensive, because it's getting ridiculous already.
I mean, you say that like you hope. Obviously, we hope that doesn't happen, but I feel like it's inevitable,
it's gonna
right?
Happen. Yeah, it's gonna happen, bro. It's gonna happen, and I mean, and it gets into. I don't know if you want to get into it right now, but it's a segue into the where does that leave PBC and Top Rank?
Right. So I'm glad. I like your transition there. I like your style there. So you had an article that you wrote within the last couple of days, earlier this week, that was titled "Rough Start, Less Shows, and Al Heyman, PBC on Prime Year and Review." Obviously, we talked about this before you came on the show, that you got some attention on that article. It was obviously it did seems like it did well in terms of traffic, and it's probably still doing pretty decent. So, it's your article. Kind of give us an overview of what your findings and your details were in it.
Yeah, so article was on fightsatw.com, and I felt that it was the right time to do something like this because there were reports that Gervonta Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach, that was scheduled for December 14th, I think, was being moved to January. And so once that happened, I started looking around and I said, well, if they're not fighting in December, then I guess this is it for the year for PBC because they don't have anything else on the schedule. They were going to do an Armory show at late December with Morrell, but he's fighting Benavidez, so that's out of the question. So there's really nothing else going on. So I was like, well, maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of look at, when they started the deal and they announced the deal in December of last year, and then kind of going through this year. They promised, I think it was like 12 to 14 shows, and they only delivered half of that, right? We only got one of the free shows that was supposed to be 4 or 5 of them, I think, this year. And we've got, I think that we got like 4 pay-per-views, I think it was, or something, or 5 pay-per-views. But what everybody, I think another layer to this was that there was anticipation from the start that PBC's on Amazon Prime. Wow, now there's going to be great exposure. It's going to be worldwide. It's going to be this big thing. We're going to be able to see fights on Prime and this, that, and third. Then shortly after, it was, hey, our first event, Prime pay-per-view. We was like, but wait a minute, so it kind of caught people off guard. Then it was back to it's $80, period, or $85 or whatever the case may be. And it wasn't no discount for Prime users. Oh, by the way, it wasn't worldwide. Select countries weren't showing it. So, kind of found out that, there was still like contract stuff and all that behind that, right? That didn't allow for them to do that. But then, looking deeper and, figuring out that, we should have never looked at it more than PBC being distributed by Amazon and not Amazon Prime Video being a Showtime or HBO. I think that was our mistake, that the boxing world looked at it as it was going to be that and more, and it wasn't.
Right. No, yeah,
so,
that makes total sense. I think I think that was a natural or a reasonable expectation from fans. How they announced it, how Amazon put it out, PBC put it out. It's like, oh, well, this is cool. They kind of jumped into the boxing. I mean, that was a natural expectation, right, from that information.
Yeah, no, it really was. And then the other confusing part was that, if you look at Prime, they were doing no type of marketing for those events other than the gloves off like a day or two before fight week, and then showing the fight week activities in the fight itself. They weren't posting it like weeks before to kind of have customers like hit the my list, or reminder or whatever. None of that stuff was being done.
Why do you think that? Because that is an interesting detail, and it's not like you're lying or we're lying about this. There's proof of that. That's a fact. You can go back and see that's what they did. The fight week and then the gloves off. They didn't really, with the reach that they have, Amazon being such a conglomerate of a company, they didn't do that. I mean, why do you think that is?
I think that it's because the deal was nothing more than, hey, we're giving you our platform to show your show, but it's going to be on you to push it. We're not going to pay you to have content on there. We're giving you our platform we're allowing you to show your fights on our platform, basically, dumbing it down. You didn't see no banners on Amazon Prime when you're shopping or whatever for Gervonta Davis fight. Like, you don't see none of that. Now you compare it to, and I did this in an article too. Look at Netflix. As soon as Paul and versus Tyson was announced, they put that fight on Netflix as an upcoming show. And when you clicked on it, you could put add to my list.
And they have billboards in Hollywood, California. There's billboards of that.
They have billboards everywhere.
Yeah.
They have trailers on social media all the time. They have the countdown show. It's supposed to drop like this weekend, narrated by Ice-T. They're using all of their resources. Is going to be nuts. I'm probably going to get the screener to watch it before, so I'll let you know what it looked like before it come out. They're putting all there, but it's a different situation. Netflix is actually paying these guys, right? And so they want a return on their investment.
Right.
Now you compare that to the Amazon deal. Do you feel like if they were paying PBC, you don't think that they would want to push the product and get a return on their investment?
So
sure.
That's also, I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's also a bit like a point of contention in regards to the speculation on this deal between PBC and Amazon, where, is it a licensing deal? There's been, I don't know if it's been PBC representatives or people like Leonard Ellerby or it might have been Steven Espinoza, obviously, who's involved there, who said that, I think he said it's not a licensing deal, and they do have a budget from Amazon, but kind of reading between the lines here. I mean, is that the truth? Like, because you would think you're right. Like you invest in something, you put money into it, you want to return on that. So,
and especially if you have the reach to do so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
how easy would it be to get a return on that with the reach that you have? Like, is this, obviously we're speculating here, but do you think this might be like, when PBC first kind of was birthed years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, almost pretty much, they were on like NBC, CBS, ESPN, like pretty much all these major channels, but, there was the reports that Al Heyman bought airtime on all those. That's why he was able to put it on all those. I mean, do you think maybe this is kind of the same thing? They just haven't really said it? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's just it's a different type of situation. I compare it to like on DAZN. You know how you get like Red Owl Boxing and you get all these like club show stuff, right?
Yeah.
DAZN is not paying them to put those shows on. They signed a deal to basically like use DAZN services to put it up. I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of like money exchanged or whatever, but they're not like giving them a budget every year type of thing. That's like a show by show type of thing. And I think with Prime is kind of the same way, where it's, hey, we're giving you these slots. They might give them money for like the gloves off, right? Maybe like, hey, we'll send, our production crew with you. That's them spending money because that's their personnel, right? So they're spending money on that. But as far as like for a fight and everything, they're not doing that. They're not doing that. And I don't have like evidence to support that. But if you look at the actions and the schedule, it supports it.
Right.
Look how many fights they've had. You mean to tell me that there's a venue issue at the Houston Rockets? Because that's what the Dan Raphael had reported. That he was being told there was venue issues with the Rockets arena in December. Come on, man. Venue issues? Then put the fight in Vegas then. I bet there'd be no venue issues there.
Touching on that subject, obviously, just like any I guess profession, there's like news reporters, sports reporters, politics reporters, environmental reporters, there's reporters. And obviously here we have our own people as well. However you would categorize yourself, whether as a reporter, a journalist, a writer, a commentator, I'm sure you're a little bit of all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we it's sometimes you kind of have to read between the lines in terms of these reports, some of these guys might have the reputation like, oh yeah, they've been around a long time, but then you see this other guy over here or this other gal say something totally different, and it's like, okay, how do we figure out like, well, who's telling the truth here? Because you're right, like I saw the same report, like venue issues, like, I mean, is that accurate? I mean, obviously we're just speculating here, but it's like, I think we've been around this sport long enough to kind of read between the lines here. Like, I don't know, like, who's your source? Like, like obviously that's a big, a big thing in journalism and reporting. Like, you never want to divulge your source, but Mike and I, like, we've gotten information from sources too, but we've got information from like sources from like within promoters, like promotional companies, within the actual teams of the fighters and stuff like that. But it's like, you always kind of take it, you have to look at it like, okay, I mean, they are a source, but like, are they going to tell you something that's not in their favor?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, you kind of have to think about that, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And whatever the reason is, the fight moving off of December tells you that there just wasn't any money in there.
Right.
For the fight. Mm-hmm. Tank demands, not that he demands personally, but his presence profile demands a certain amount of money. And at this point, and if you can't meet that, then for a guy like Tank, you're like, all right, well, let's just move it to a point where you can meet it. End of the year, everybody's always kind of like dancing around, trying to make sure that they fall under the year-end budget or the quarter budget or whatever. But then that comes into January, and January, that clock starts over, right? And right. So I think that was the case for that. And this is my thing, and I put this in the article. I reached out to Prime Video, and they appreciated me requesting the information, but declined to comment.
Of course, yeah.
My thing with that is, because even declining to comment is an answer. It's a comment. Yeah. What is the old saying goes? If you don't have anything good to say, you don't say it at all. You don't say anything at all, right?
Yeah.
If indeed the relationship and the situation over there, was, filled with promise, and, it's been, developed or developing, and it's producing all these things, you'd want to brag about that.
Right.
You'd want to get that word out publicly.
Mm-hmm.
For them not to want to comment on it tells me that that's not the situation.
Right. Yeah. Because you're right. Like, I remember when DAZN first started, I think they had, I'm sure it was a Canelo fight, or maybe it might have been one of the Triple G trilogies or something like that. I think at one point they came out with like a press release or something, like kind of touting the ratings behind it. Mm-hmm. And, like, they're a private company, unless they release it, you're never really going to see it. But they came out and said like, oh, we did 1 million households or whatever it was. And like, you also kind of have to read between those lines. Like, oh, okay, like you're obviously happy enough and excited enough to be like, hey, we did so well. Let's tell the world, like, we're trying to make it. But, if you do, like you said, if you don't release anything, does that mean you're not happy with it? Or, did policies change? Like, hey, we don't release anything. Like, is that what Amazon's doing? Like, like anything, we would love to be a fly on the wall in the conversations between PBC, Al Heyman, and like Amazon representatives and all that. You would love to be a fly on the wall. Is Amazon happy with, even though it might be some type of licensing deal? Are they happy with the return?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, what are we looking at here?
Or it could be a situation where they're unsure of what to make out of the year, and instead of maybe putting their foot in their mouth, possibly they just, prefer not to comment. Because remember, this is the first time that they're getting into the boxing business. So even though they have like the one boxing show or whatever, I think that this is a unique situation, and they may feel like, well, let's just kind of wait and see. Let's regroup. Let's figure out what we're gonna do in 2025, and then make an assessment on that. Because normally, what you do is you can't have a comparative analysis on a situation unless you have like 2 years worth of stuff, right? So they had this first year, they're going into the second year. You can't compare 1 year to another because you've only been with them 1 year or 8 months, really. Right. So I think that they're gonna just wait and see and go from there. I'd be really interested in seeing how this year works out. And if it doesn't go the way they're hoping, then I'd be interested to see if they pull out. If they pull out, because it was supposedly a multi-year deal. So does that mean, like, let's say, is it a 3-year deal with like Amazon having the option of pulling out in year 2, or PBC having the option of pulling out in year 2? Right. Is it exclusive to Amazon? So can PBC, look for a TV deal somewhere? Now, that brings me into the point of Top Rank, right? So Top Rank's deal expires in August of next year. Rumors swirling around that ESPN is not picking them up and not re-signing. So if that happens, then what do? You have to think about who out there has a platform big enough to pay Top Rank the type of money they're going to want and possibly house the library that is currently housed at ESPN. Ones that come to mind is Netflix, Warner Brothers Discovery, and in a lesser scale would be the CW. Warner Brothers Discovery just signed a new deal with AEW.
That's a good point. Yeah. And that's kind of, even though like it might not be the same fan base, that's close enough where if you have that library, like it could work.
But check this out though. Within the Warner Brothers Discovery, you have TNT, TBS, you have network TV.
Right.
So you can put fights in any one of those.
Yeah.
A&E or whatever the case may be. But the AEW deal also has the on-demand and the pay-per-views are going to be on Max.
Yeah, HBO. App. That's right. Yeah.
So
that's huge, man.
It would make sense for someone like Top Rank to be like, okay, we go over there. We can do our regular shows on any of one of those channels. Maybe even TNT, because I think TNT used to have fights back in the day with Antonio Tarver. I think he used to host. He used to commentate.
Yeah. And they're also losing basketball. So they're going to have to fill a void there, right?
Yeah, and this is the thing. The new thing with all these companies is they want live content. Everybody's looking for kind of live content. They have the libraries. They want live content. So I wouldn't be surprised if Warner Brothers Discovery is a player. I think Netflix is going to see how this Tyson thing goes, and they may be boutique. They may say, okay, we'll pick certain fights that we want, and we'll pay for them, but not do anything long term. So, like for instance, like if we were to get like Tank versus Loma, I wouldn't be surprised if Netflix says, okay, we'll put on that fight.
Right.
We'll give you guys $20 million to cut it up, and we'll take those rights to that fight.
Right.
And then just kind of do it like that, like pick and choose in between all the promoters. Kind of do like what Turkey is doing in a sense, but doing one-offs. Right.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. Yeah. I mean, it's getting interesting, man. People talking about like the resurgence of boxing. Is it happening? Is Turkey Al Sheikh and Riyadh season? Like obviously they're trying to consolidate, and he wants to kind of have everything under one umbrella. It seems like all under DAZN, that he can kind of go global. I mean, now that deal with Inoue, that he's stretching to Japan now. I mean, I know obviously there's concerns about the political climate in terms of Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. But in terms of the sport, I mean, this guy's got the money. They got the money over there, man. And boxing has gotten so, in the last 10 years or so. I mean, obviously the prize fighters have always been very well compensated, but in the last 10 years or so, there's guys they're world champs and they're good fighters. But I've had casual fans come up to me when they see hey man, I saw this guy's getting paid $4 million for that fight. Who is he? And I'm just oh, he's a world champ. He's good. He's man, these guys are getting paid $4 million. He's what about guys like Canelo? It's oh, well, he's a superstar, man. He's just man, these guys make more money than these UFC guys. UFC's blown up so much. That's what they have to compare it to. So, but it's from a financial viability standpoint in boxing, that's real, man. It is a business. So with Turkey Al-Sheikh coming in with the checkbook and all that oil money, people are oh, let's go over there, man.
Yeah, and I don't know how long that lasts. I don't think that's a forever thing. I don't think that's a forever thing. That has a shelf life.
Yeah.
Even with somebody that has unlimited resources like him. One thing I did mention was that I forgot to mention was the CW, right? And I mentioned them, but I didn't get into detail. I can see PBC having shows on the CW, almost like how they used to have Showtime Championship Boxing on Saturdays kind of thing, but having that on the CW. The CW has ramped up their live programming,
right?
And they just picked up WWE NXT,
I saw that.
And brought them aboard. I don't know where they're getting this money from, but they've got new shows and all that. They've really ramped up. And this is the thing. It's national TV. The app is free. There's more potential for exposure there. They don't charge for a subscription. They just have a whole bunch of ads on there. And so that could be something where PBC maybe does shows on there, right? And they get a deal there. So all of this is a lot of interesting stuff. But those entities that I spoke of, CW, Netflix, Warner Bros. Discovery, if you see those things start rolling out, remember where you heard it first.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, once again, man, I appreciate you jumping on here on the Last Round Boxing Podcast. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, to our listeners, I know it's been several weeks since you guys have had a new episode, but here it is. We're gonna try to keep this weekly going, especially with our changes in schedule. Hopefully, Mike can kind of get back in the rhythm here, kind of find some openings in his schedule. But even then, I'll try to pump out some stuff with you guys and get some other guests and stuff like that. And I'm sure Abe will be back again to fill in. But before we end the show here, Abe, go ahead and let the fans and the listeners know where they can find you and follow you and what you have upcoming, man.
Yeah, follow me on X at AbeG718, on Instagram as well. The website is fightsatw.com. I have boxing and wrestling content there. So if you're a fan of WWE, AEW, the Indies, you can find articles and recaps there, along with features and recaps of everything boxing. And so the one thing I do have coming up to look out for is I'll be having a celebrity prediction panel for Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. I'll have some actors and actresses and music artists and some other special guests giving their take on there. So, trying to have a little bit of fun with it. And I'm going to have a special limited edition cover by Fight Posium, who does everybody's illustration. You check them out on Instagram and stuff. And and so that should be fun. And that'll be coming out on Fight Week for Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson.
Fights ATW going Hollywood over there, huh? Going Hollywood, man. I get it. Sometimes it's all about the partnerships. I get it. So for my guest of the week, and Abraham Gonzalez, the editor-in-chief of FightsATW.com, I'm Danny Z. This is the last round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round